A 19-year-old girl, condemned as a heretic, was bound to a stake as her executioners prepared the torch. But her final moments would seal a legend, not bury it. In a damp cell in Rouen, the savior of France sat shackled to a wooden block. The soldiers who guarded her were the same men whose armies she had shattered on the battlefield at Orléans. Just months before, she had been the living symbol of French resistance, a peasant girl who heard the voices of saints and turned the tide of the 100 Years' War. Now, she was property of the English crown, a political prisoner purchased for 10,000 livres. Their goal was not just to silence her, but to unravel the very divine legitimacy she had bestowed upon King Charles VII. If they could paint her as a fraud or a witch, the king she crowned would fall. This is the story of a trial that was never meant to be fair, and an execution designed to erase a symbol from history. Her capture at Compiègne was a stroke of luck for the Burgundians, England's allies. They sold her to the English, who saw not a prisoner of war, but a weapon. They transported her to Rouen, the nerve center of their occupied territory. Here, in the castle of Bouvrouil, the legal machinery of her destruction began to turn. The judge was Bishop Pierre Cauchon, a man whose ambitions were tethered to English patronage. The charges were a masterpiece of religious legalese, heresy, witchcraft, disobeying the church, and the persistent crime of dressing in men's clothes. But from the very first interrogation on February 21, 1431, the truth was clear. This was a psychological siege, not an inquiry. The tribunal of 42 clerics circled her with theological traps. "Are you in a state of grace?" one demanded. Church doctrine stated no one could be certain of God's grace. To claim it was prideful heresy. To deny it was to admit her visions were false. Joan's reply was a flawless parry that silenced the room. "If I am not, may God put me there. If I am, may God keep me there." Her intellect and composure in that chapel, surrounded by hostile, learned men, was a victory in itself. Yet it only hardened their resolve to break her. The trial's deepest corruption, however, was not in the questions, but in her captivity. Canon law was explicit. An accused heretic, especially a woman, must be held in an ecclesiastical prison under the care of nuns. Joan was kept in a military fortress, chained day and night, with 5 English soldiers constantly in her cell. She had no privacy, no safety, no respite from their taunts and threats. Witnesses from her later rehabilitation trial would recount the soldiers' cruelty, their mocking, and the ever-present danger of physical violation. This explains her desperate cling to male attire. The tightly laced hose and tunic were a literal armor against assault. When she begged the judges for a church prison, they refused. They needed her broken, and isolation was their tool. For weeks, this pressure cooker of fear and interrogation continued. The original 70 charges were whittled down to 12, but the outcome was never in doubt. Then, on May 24th, they took her to the cemetery of Saint-Ouen and showed her the instruments of her death, the stake, the faggots of wood. The physical terror of the fire, after months of psychological torment, finally overwhelmed her. She agreed to sign a document of abjuration, a confession that her voices were false and her mission a lie. In exchange, her sentence was commuted from burning to perpetual imprisonment. She put on a woman's dress. Her captors seemed to have won. But was this surrender or a tactical retreat from the precipice of a horrifying death? The victory lasted less than 3 days. According to multiple later accounts, her guards, whether by cruel design or casual malice, removed her woman's dress from the cell, leaving her only the forbidden male garments. Faced with indecency and vulnerability, she put them on. When Bishop Cauchon and his men visited, they found her relapsed. In their eyes, she had returned to her heresy like a dog to its vomit. Canon law was merciless. A relapsed heretic could be shown no mercy. The recantation was a trap all along, and she had stepped into it. Her fate was now irrevocably sealed. On morning of May 30th, 1431, she was led to the old marketplace. Tied to a tall plaster pillar, she asked for a cross. An English soldier, moved by a sudden pity, broke 2 sticks and bound them into a crude crucifix. She kissed it and held it to her chest. As the flames roared upward, eyewitnesses reported she cried out, "Jesus," repeatedly until her voice was swallowed by the fire. The English, terrified her remains would become relics, burned her body 2 more times until it was ash, then scattered it in the Seine River. They believed they were erasing a problem from the earth and from memory. They sought to extinguish a heretic, but they had kindled an eternal flame. So what were we truly witnessing in that square? A judicial execution or a state-sponsored murder wearing the mask of piety? The English motive was transparently political. Joan's greatest sin was not hearing voices, it was being believed. She proved that authority could spring from conviction, not just bloodline. By destroying her, they hoped to collapse the morale of France. They failed. Her death became the cornerstone of her legend. In 1456, a new trial, initiated by her mother, declared the original verdict null and void, ripped apart by testimony of its own corrupt procedures. In 1920, the church that condemned her canonized her as a saint. Her legacy forces a piercing question that echoes through centuries. When institutions of power feel threatened by a single unwavering belief, how far will they go to rewrite its truth? Do they argue, or do they simply erase? Joan's story is the ultimate testament that while you can burn a person to ash, you cannot burn away an idea whose time has come. Her voice, from the flames, proved louder than all the judges in their robes. The most dangerous person is not the one with an army, but the one whose story becomes an army. If you understand how history is shaped in these shadowy clashes between conviction and power, please like this video. For more deep dives into the figures who changed the world from the ground up, subscribe to Shadow of History.